did you notice now the scene? This woman who is not of the Israelite tribe, that therefore doesn't put her in a very good position with regard to the Jews, is trying her best to get to the privileges of the Jews. She's tugging hard because she wants this healing. But the problem is that if the Lord started to go outside Israel, he would end up as just an automatic healer, a wonder worker, and that was not what he was there for. He had therefore to be a bit severe so as not to start something which he would not have been able to cope with. A lesson to us, not to take on absolutely everything that we can, because we have nevertheless to safeguard the quality of our interior life, not be so thinly spread that we're losing our bearings. Now I just want to reflect for an instance on this question of what's going on here. This woman is pleading, pleading, pleading. When we're praying, is it not true that a high proportion of our prayer is spent in automatic pilot? We start off well and then we're way into the clouds, thinking about all kinds of other things. And we think we're praying. Well, actually, maybe we're more like human Tibetan prayer machines, thinking that the more we repeat things, the more we're actually pulling. Well, actually, it's not necessarily the case. A good example of pulling hard is what a child does. A child can really pull hard on the Lord. I had a case one day. I was talking to a French priest, and he said that this happened, I think not that long ago, when he was talking in Lourdes. It was a child who was on his stretcher, and he knew that if he prayed hard enough, he could get healing, something like this woman here. So he was praying and praying and praying and praying and praying, like you might do down there if you're really in trouble. So, anyway, there he was, and the bishop came round with the Blessed Sacrament, and he was blessing people there individually on their stretchers, children, adults, and in-betweens. So this child was there praying hard, and he was going to get healed because he was praying so hard that the Lord wouldn't be able to refuse him. So there he was, and the Blessed Sacrament passed. So, he said in strong French, if it's like that, I'm going to have a word with it about this to your mother. So he was taken down to the grotto and pulled even harder, and he was healed. That's the child's prayer, not refused by heaven on high. But it happened also in another situation very different. It was in the communist regime. It was either Russia itself or one of the satellite countries like Hungary or one of those, but it doesn't really matter. It was certainly a very severe atheistic classroom that this took place in. There were people, probably at your age, there, just little people like any others. But the problem was, you see, that some of them had some kind of notion of faith. Do you know how? Who would pass it on? It wasn't so much Mammy and Daddy as who?
Granny Sam.
That's it, you got it. It's the other generation, isn't it? They had access to the children when they were playing with them, and so it was passed on in secret against the wish of the authorities. So there they were, these little people in class, you see, and there was this very aggressive classroom teacher who was pretty keen on getting the communist message through. And there was one girl who was particularly vocal and fervent in not being shy about the faith that she received from her grandparents. And so this teacher was always picking on her, especially when it came to this message. And at one point she was giving the anti-Christian catechism, if you like, and she came out with this. All right, if he exists, tell him to come here. What did she do? She stood up, looked round at all in the classroom and said, "Okay, he said that if 2 or 3 agree on what will be asked, it'll be done for them. Let's ask." And they all prayed together and pulled hard on the child Jesus. "Come, come." And she was amazed. The teacher was going on here. Do you know what happened? Suddenly, there was a great stillness. The classroom door opened, and in came a brilliant child, all covered in light and beaming with joy, gazing at these children. Ah! The teacher didn't know what to do. She ran out screaming and went to the boss and said what happened. Do you know what was happening then? The boss copped on. "You must silence this." What happened? She was sent forevermore to the lunatic asylum. And all she could say was, "He came! He came! He came!" It's true. It's true. One more story about what happened in communist Russia. It was a group of nuns, and they were in their chapter, that means the big meeting place, to discuss what to do about all this mess of communist persecution, what the future was going to be. So they were there in prayer before they started, and they started to discuss their thing. But they had, as they would in those countries, something before them. Not a statue so much as an icon. You know what an icon is, don't you? It's a kind of, it's like this one there, on the wall there. That's a good example. But these icons, they would be so much prayed before by people that there was smoke all over them because they had big long candles and incense and all that kind of thing. So it would leave bit by bit as the years went by, kind of soot and messy stuff, and it would change colour and become more grey than white. So there they were, and they had this icon before them. And you know what happened? They all noticed, what's going on? It started at the top, and then went down, 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 down. What was happening? Can you guess? Any idea?
No.
It was being polished up, miraculously, and the angels were cleaning it up, bit by bit. But they left their signature. Do you know what it was?
No.
Where does the artist normally put his signature?
At the bottom.
At the bottom, which corner?
Side.
Exactly. So at that side, on the bottom right, what did they do?
Sign it.
They didn't actually sign it with the name, but what they did was this. As at the end of the war, if you go to England, some places like Portsmouth, they've left deliberately a part of a building to show how the church and so on was ruined completely, just to show how it was. Same in Germany. So too they did with the icon. They left one bit in the bottom on the right, unchanged. That's how it was before we got to work. So the Mother Superior said, no one's going to believe us. Now each sister, as you are, write exactly what you're seeing as it was happening before their eyes. So that's our God. That's our God. Do you want one more story? One more. It was another nun in, again, communist Russia, or that is Lithuania. They had a rough time. And the reason why Lithuania had a terrible time was this. Whereas in Russia, the authorities of the Eastern Orthodox Church did eventually start to collaborate a bit with the Communist Party. That's how they got away with it. They were given that permission to have their churches if they collaborated, but it wasn't exactly the best thing to do. But the Lithuanians, because they were Catholics, wouldn't do that a bit. Not one iota. They were faithful to the Pope. So they had a terrible, terrible time, torture and all the rest of it. And this nun was being terribly, terribly, terribly tortured. And she was riddled with cancer. Completely full of cancer. Now, I'm not sure how it happened. Maybe it was after things calmed down, when things became more open, that she was able to get out of Lithuania just about alive, and she went to John Paul II, by now Blessed John Paul II, and soon to be Saint John Paul II, but still John Paul II. And he looked at her, and what did he do? He went up to her and squeezed her hard. Squeezed her hard. And you know what happened? She felt that there was something happening. And this body, completely riddled with cancer, was completely healed. Now do you see how he's going like a rocket from being just born John Paul II to be Venerable John Paul II to be Blessed John Paul II to be Saint John Paul II. He's dynamite. And we've met him. So we've kind of touched somebody who's way up there. But he's one of us. So let's think about that. Both children and big men like John Paul II can pull on the same God. And he answers, if we pray like this woman, sincerely.